Welcome to Medicine and Science from the BMJ. I'm Kamran and Rebecca. In this episode, we'll be hearing about new research on chocolate consumption and diabetes.
We are making the hypothesis that it's probably because dark chocolate has higher cocoa content, which is where all those beneficial flavonoids come from. And milk chocolate has lower cocoa content and often more added sugar and saturated fat, which can counteract any potential health benefits.
And why one country singer loves the NHS.
And these words started forming. NHS, our precious thing, heals us all, makes us sing, keeps us hearty, young and old. NHS, our heart and soul. So I wrote it down.
But first, if you've spent any time reading the BMJ or listening to our podcast, you'll know that we're worried about conflicts of interest undermining health and healthcare. It's a common theme in our investigations, and central to one of our recent issues is the way in which food manufacturers have infiltrated UK schools. Let's hear from Emma Wilkinson, the journalist who broke the story, and some of the people she spoke to.
Academics, public health experts and campaigners are calling for a pushback against the food industry's influence in UK schools and nurseries. An investigation by the BMJ has shown how much the food industry has worked its way into children's education, through things such as breakfast clubs and healthy eating campaigns. Experts told me these tactics need a lot more scrutiny, alongside the action against alcohol and gambling companies funding education programmes in schools. When I spoke to May van Schalkwijk, a specialist doctor in public health, she said the issue was subtle but very problematic.
So there's no smoking gun here. It's not like the tobacco industry funding inhalers, but it's classic industry activities, completely reframing the problem. We haven't even stopped to ask, is any of this acceptable for children?
For more than 20 years, Kellogg's and Greggs have sponsored school breakfast clubs in the UK, reaching thousands of primary school children. Another example is Food: A Fact of Life, an education programme provided by the British Nutrition Foundation, or BNF. The programme includes resources and training for teachers from reception up to GCSE. The BNF is funded by its members, which include British Sugar, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Kellogg's, Mars, Nestle, Greggs and McDonald's. Critics told me this kind of stealth marketing allows these brands, which make foods high in fat, salt and sugar, to present themselves as part of the solution to the obesity crisis, while also pushing the very products that have contributed to it.
In my opinion, there are several things going on here. Number one, the companies are laundering their reputations. Number two, they're creating some brand awareness. So yes, they are giving some healthy food and some sensible nutrition advice, but they're also creating awareness of a brand that sells a lot of products that we all are pretty clear don't have the healthiest profiles. There's then another problem that these are the same companies that have contributed in many ways to creating a food environment that makes it impossible for children to follow even really, really top quality nutrition advice. And the final problem is the advice is, in my view, often a bit incomplete. So whilst it is sensible to say to kids, you should eat fresh fruit and veg, whether or not you can afford it or access it, what is often seems to be left out is, what about harmful food? Are these companies giving kids clear advice about the kind of harmful products that they make?
In response, Greggs told me its Greggs Foundation is an independent grant-making charity, and that the Breakfast Club programme is a long-term initiative of 25 years that represents a strong commitment by the Greggs Foundation to support schools, pupils and families where need is greatest. Greggs plc is one of its funders and donates 1% of its annual profits to the foundation each year. A Kellogg's spokesperson says, breakfast clubs can help to improve children's attendance and attainment, as well as alleviating hunger in some cases. The commitment from Kellogg's to help schools through its breakfast club grants can also be a lifeline to parents too. The BNF says its content is based on the school curricula, developed by former teachers and overseen by its science director and independent education working groups. Frank Atherton, the Chief Medical Officer for Wales, and Jerry Taylor, spokesperson for the Association of Directors of Public Health, are among those who publicly raised concerns about stealth marketing by the food industry.
If you have a food company sponsoring your breakfast club, you have to consider what they are providing and what they are getting out of it. The dilemma becomes, Is it better to have a breakfast club sponsored by them than no breakfast club at all? When you have an organisation providing advice to school children around things like nutrition, alcohol, gambling, again, what is their motivation? Sometimes you'll find that the advice is around personal responsibility. It's up to you if you're eating the wrong foods or drinking too much, rather than the responsibility of organisations not to be promoting these things to children. However much they may be thinking about the public good, obviously, they've got conflicting outcomes that they want to achieve. Their main raison d'etre is to sell their product.
To discuss conflicts of interest, I'm joined by Rebecca Coombes, Head of Journalism at the BMJ. Bex, thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you.
We were involved with an event at the Royal College of Physicians called Dangerous Liaisons, which discussed these issues. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's something the BMJ has been covering for a very, very long time, as you will know, Cameron. And it's looking at conflicts of interest. And I think what we want to do is to move towards zero tolerance. And particularly it's looking at harmful industries and how they exert influence on those people that might want to curb their influence, basically. So that might be doctors, it might be people who sit on guideline committees, it might be charities, other health professionals, governments, and you see here, this is a great example, isn't it, with the food industry getting involved in schools. And some people might say, well, what's wrong with that? Some parents are really struggling to feed their children at the moment, and Kellogg's and Greggs are spending, Greggs are reaching 60,000 children a day in this country. So it's incredible. The figures are staggering. We've got a new Labour government. They want to roll out breakfast clubs. And on the basis that the Department for Education has got no money, there's a real concern about who will fund these. But I mean, as this investigation showed, and we've seen it again and again with fossil fuels, alcohol, drugs, and gambling. You can't. If you're profiting from something, you can't be part of the solution. Basically, I think that. For example, with the foods, you're creating a brand awareness, aren't you? Some of these Greggs breakfast clubs, you have people in Greggs branded aprons, and it's okay in the context of the clubs because they're getting bread. They're not getting some of the more harmful products that these brands produce. Kellogg's, they're just having cornflakes. But Kellogg's produce Frosties, which, Action on Sugar recently kind of showed it's got excessive amounts of sugar. So you're creating that brand awareness and shoring up problems for the future because you can't control whether somebody's going to migrate to those products. Yeah.
So there are a few issues here, Bex. One of which is the industries we're talking about. There are certain industries where you can say the product that industry produces is harmful and it's a clear cut.
Yeah, so like tobacco.
Tobacco is the obvious example. Yeah. But food, we need to eat. So I think that's where things become a little complicated for people because they think this is a company doing something that's good. And then how do you define what's good and bad? And then how do you regulate that? And it's all under the label of big food, isn't it? How industries and corporations maneuver greater profitability. And unfortunately, a lot of it is through promoting, marketing, and selling unhealthy foods.
In which they make a vast amount of profit from. And I think that, as we saw with tobacco, there's a lot of seeding of disinformation. So I don't know if you recently saw that you've got new advertising regulations coming in for TV and online. But what industry's been pumping out is saying, do you realise that crumpets will be caught in the net here? Do you realise that porridge will be caught in the net here? And actually porridge won't. It's just porridge that has golden syrup added to it. Some crumpets have been reformulated, so they won't be caught.
Yeah, it's just clever marketing,
It's clever marketing. Yeah, indeed.
And because people don't have the full facts about any of these issues that are being played up. Food itself, when it comes to the products that are produced, I think what we'd argue always is there has to be some national level regulation of what's in those foods to help the population's health. But the other side of it is, and that was one of the issues discussed at Dangerous Liaisons, was how then industry becomes involved in mitigating or managing or solving the problem. And I think
by setting the standards, the nutritional...
or having things like Gamble Aware or Drink Aware.
Yeah.
But we're arguing that isn't a role for industry.
We're absolutely arguing that. They should not have any role in coming up with a solution. I mean, as Greg, I think it was the head of food policy at the Soil Association, Rob Percival, said, an organisation sponsored by McDonald's, Mars and Nestle shouldn't be within 100 miles of children's food education.
Yeah.
So, and the problem with the reason why they shouldn't be involved is because it allows them to sort of frame the problem, basically. So you can start talking about taking responsibility. It's not the food environment. It's you for being weak, for not being able to only treat these foods as a treat.
Yeah. I mean, some people will not make the argument. They do make the argument, and it's an argument made around fossil fuel companies, is that, well, you're trying to solve something, improve something, you have to have these organisations at the table. But I think what we're saying is, discuss with them, consult them, but the people making the decisions and the recommendations, they should be free of conflicts. They shouldn't have shares in these companies or have other responsibilities or entanglements with these companies that they're then making decisions about.
Yeah, I mean, we had these responsibility deals, didn't we, under the Cameron government, and it really came to nothing and it fizzled out. And you're right, policy is just taking too long to change. The advertising regulations that are about to come in next year have been in the works for 17 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 17 years, I think that was one of the figures quoted at the meeting, which I was at as well.
Yeah. And
I think the point I came away with was that, and I think I said it at the time, talk is cheap. We need action. I mean, you can complain about entanglements, conflicts of interest in your own sphere, but if you're in a position to do something about it, do something about it. Whether you're the president of the Royal College of Physicians or whether you're the chief medical officer of Wales or England, make sure there is a system that allows you to make recommendations or policy that excludes those conflicts.
Yeah, and so in the case of school food, we're saying we'll help organise an open letter. It was signed by 36 health professionals, members of the House of Lords, that there should be no commercial involvement in any food that's given in schools.
Yeah.
We've said one thing we've said to the government is that why do you have scientists on the advisory group for nutrition who've got links with big food? It's just not necessary.
But unfortunately, that is not it's not the case that those people are being excluded from the decision making. And I think when you say to people, well, let's do something about it, I think then it becomes complicated because often it's the leadership or it's the people senior in government who are being lobbied by these organisations who then find it difficult to do the right thing. I think all we're saying is, if you're serious about people's health and well-being, do the right thing.
Do the right thing, indeed.
Okay, Bex, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And the article that prompted this, Food Industry Has Infiltrated UK Children's Education, Stealth Marketing Exposed, is free to access on bmj.com. Next, new research we've published suggests that there's an association between chocolate consumption and lowering type 2 diabetes risk. With Christmas coming soon, we asked whether that's too good to be true. Duncan Jarvis spoke to the authors.
My name is Binkai Liu, and I am a doctoral student at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health, Department of Nutrition.
And Dr. Sun.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here, Duncan. My name is Qi Sung. I'm a faculty member in the Departments of Nutrition and Epidemiology at Harvard School of Public Health. I also hold a faculty position at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Harvard Medical School.
What you've done is publish a new study with us that's looking at this association between chocolate consumption and type 2 diabetes risk. Why was it you wanted to choose those two variables as something to look for an association with?
Type 2 diabetes is a growing global health challenge, which affects a lot of people worldwide, and is largely driven by lifestyle factors, which includes diet. And chocolate, especially dark chocolate, has been studied extensively for its potential health benefits, particularly because it contains flavonoids, which is a bioactive compound that have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and provide antioxidant effects, which are essential for diabetes prevention. And given the availability of the dietary data in our cohorts, we wanted to explore whether chocolate, particularly dark chocolate, could play a role in reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes. And a lot of previous observational studies did not differentiate the specific subtypes of chocolate being consumed. And given that we had the data, the idea of looking at this popular, widely consumed treat and its potential benefits for such a important, serious condition feels like an important and interesting topic to investigate.
And as you said there, you already had some data to do this with. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for this study, we relied on data from 3 large, well-established prospective cohorts: the Nurses' Health Study 1 and 2, and the Health Professionals Follow-up Study. These cohorts contain many nurses and doctors, and these cohorts have exceptional follow-up rates in terms of the level of detail they provide and the participation rates. And we had over 30 years of follow-up when these participants regularly fill out the dietary questionnaires, which allowed us to track their habitual chocolate intake over time. And we also had comprehensive information on their health conditions, their lifestyle, and other demographic factors.
So just to be clear there, the outcome measures that you were looking at were very well measured. This is part of a kind of ongoing study that's measuring lots of people's health status in different ways. But the input to that, the diet information, that's come from self-reported questionnaires. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Our dietary questionnaires were administered every 2 to 4 years, and they have been previously validated.
It really depends on what foods and beverages you're talking about. For coffee and for chocolate consumption, I think those food items typically are reported with a little bit better accuracy than less consumed foods, because those are habitual consumption that they really interest me.
So now the big question that everyone kind of wants to know the answer to: what is the association between eating chocolate, and particularly dark chocolate, and your risk of diabetes?
Great. So our study found a stark difference between dark and milk chocolate. People who ate dark chocolate regularly, at least 5 servings per week, had a significantly lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Milk chocolate did not show the same benefit, and in fact, higher milk chocolate consumption was associated with excessive weight gain over time, which could increase the risk of diabetes.
And so what do you take from that? Is it the dark chocolate itself that's a factor, or is it something perhaps associated with the consumption of dark chocolate being more part of a kind of healthy lifestyle?
I think it's a mixture of both. So first of all, to answer your questions for the differences between dark and milk chocolate, we are making the hypothesis that it's probably because dark chocolate has higher cocoa content, which is where all those beneficial flavonoids come from. And milk chocolate has lower cocoa content and often more added sugar and saturated fat, which can counteract any potential health benefits. But we did notice that people who consume higher dark chocolate intake have a generally healthier lifestyle, but we did account for those factors in our statistical models, where we adjusted for a wide range of potential confounders, including overall dietary quality, physical activity, alcohol intake, smoking status, etc.
Great. Now, there has been a little bit of criticism of this paper about just what you were saying there, saying it's never possible to really account for all of the potential confounders within a cohort there. Dr. Sun, this is often the criticism of nutritional epidemiology. What do you say to some of that?
Yeah, I think there's in epidemiology, we do not assign any of the we call exposure. You can maybe say treatment or intervention to anybody, which is simply let the participants live their life and we observe. So that as you say, dark chocolate consumers may be living a healthier lifestyle than milk chocolate consumers. But we use the technique that we call multivariate adjustment, where we control the body mass index, the physical activity, that causes so on and so forth. So the logic behind this technique is that assuming everything else is equal, whether dark chocolate consumption higher or lower is associated with the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. One could argue that you may not consider all the possible queries. You can really adjust to achieve this causality. In our paper, in all of our papers, we raise that cautionary notes to everybody reading our paper that this is not causality, this is association. Having said this, I feel the evidence is still valid in terms of after multivariate adjustment, we still observe association between dark chocolate and the type 2 diabetes. Is that association biologically plausible? We think so, given that dark chocolate contains cocoa at least 50% or higher, and the cocoa contains flavonol, which we know from animal experiments, from human studies, those are potent antioxidants, can really help improving insulin resistance. So we have the biological plausibility to demonstrate, this what we observed could be really reflecting the causality. The other thing is that, think about chocolate, as Binkai mentioned, carries some public health significance because this is really popular snack and treat that enjoyed by people around the world. So I feel it's reasonable to really examine dark chocolate versus milk chocolate in relation to health outcomes. And people probably know there's a trial called Cosmos trial conducted by my colleague Hobby Session and Joy Manson at the Brigham Hospital. That's a 3.5 year trial, tested really high dose of just cocoa without other dietary contacts on the outcomes, cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And we feel, a longer observational study that, what we did here with more than 10 years of follow-up in free living individuals without assigned cocoa supplementation, but rather eating the very dark chocolate. I feel this is a really legitimate question to ask. For epidemiology, I want to say that, consistency is really, really important. You really need to, conduct this analysis across different populations. They have different funding patterns. Now, if you observe really consistent pattern of associations, I think you are sure there's something beneficial or harmful depending on what you're looking at. So having said this, I really want to encourage my colleagues around the world who's listening to this podcast, look at their own data, try to replicate our findings. Then maybe after a few years collectively, we can really draw a more solid conclusion regarding dark chocolate with type 2 diabetes.
And you can read the research paper on bmj.com. It's called Chocolate Intake and Risk of Type 2 Diabetes. Our final piece is a little hint of this year's Christmas edition. Sam Hutt is a doctor in the NHS, but we know him by his stage persona of Hank Wangford. following an illness, Hank's fears over the potential privatisation of the NHS drove him to sing on stage at Glastonbury about the NHS, Our Precious Thing. Richard Hurley, who co-edited the Christmas theme issue this year, found out more.
NHS, Our Precious Thing, heals us all, makes us sing, keeps us hardy, young and old. NHS, our heart and soul. We gotta cherish it for our sick nation. Fight those greedy corporations. They just want profits, they just want wealth. They want to break up our national health. Just plain robbers.
Thanks for getting in touch with us. We were really delighted to hear from you, and the song's fantastic. So, and this, you wrote the song in response to NHS care that you received recently. Can you just tell me what was the experience of the care you received?
Okay, like a lot of people, I've got atrial fibrillation.
Yeah,
I had a coronary episode when I was 70, and that scarred the heart. Very common. One of the treatments for fibrillation is called ablation.
Yeah,
and this year I had my fourth and last ablation. For the most part, this last one has not been successful, and I'm back into atrial fibrillation and tachycardia.
right.
So now
Sorry to hear that.
Well, there you go. I live with it. What it means is I'm a bit weaker than I would be as an 83-year-old man. I get a bit more tired than usual, but I can still do gigs and I can still write songs and do all that. After the 5-hour procedure, I woke up in intensive care where I was going to be for a week with my head full of anger at all the people who keep knocking the NHS. You know, you tell us the NHS is broken, so we might as well take it over and privatise it and make it all smooth. I got a bit outraged by that. And these words started forming. NHS, our precious thing, heals us all, makes us sing, keeps us hearty, young and old. NHS, our heart and soul. So I wrote it down.
Yeah.
And then in the next week, while I was in intensive care, I wrote the verses, which are largely to do with myself and having the ablation and being treated on the NHS.
Yes.
And the fact, which is such a common experience of so many people, is once you get in there, the care is fantastic. But it's the once you get in there problem, isn't it? It's the waiting list. It's the getting access to your GP, getting access to the specialists. And then this completely unoriginal thought that occurred to me. But in my medicated craziness after the op, I thought, you know, the NHS, it's our soul. It's our soul. It's the country's soul. You know, it's not just an institution. It's an extraordinarily important part of all our psyches, of everything. So it has to be maintained as it is, free at the point of entry, and as good as it can be. So that was the drive for it.
Well, who do you think it is? Who is it who's putting the NHS down? What do you see the threat?
In the press, we keep reading about people pronouncing that it's broken. Well, in some senses, parts of it are. The access to it is. The understaffing, the availability of ambulances, the big knock it got from COVID, and that was a huge knock.
Yeah.
Who's behind it all? Well, I love that line in Spinal Tap, which is money talks and bullshit walks. You know, it's money.
Yeah.
Now, whoever is up to gaining money through that could be behind a push.
Okay.
So the obvious, if facile thing, is to say corporations who would love to get their hands on it.
And you worked in the NHS a long time. What changes did you see?
Mostly, really, in our situation, that need to speed up. And in what I was doing, you needed time. You couldn't do it all in 10 minutes. You had to have half an hour with some people, 10 minutes with others. But if you needed half an hour, you needed half an hour. If you needed an hour, you needed an hour. You know.
So you had this fascinating portfolio career of being a doctor and a country music pioneer. How is it to have those two jobs at once? What do you say to doctors who are thinking about a portfolio career?
It depends what you want. I always wanted to be a musician. I always loved medicine. So how do I get out of that dilemma? And the answer was I could work part-time. And the maximum I worked was 2.5 days a week.
Yeah.
So it'd be Tuesday, Wednesday, and a bit of Thursday was the maximum. So that was enough for me to get clinical satisfaction, to see a lot of people, to keep sharp in my practice with my techniques. The problem with us doctors is we get a bit full of ourselves. If other doctors want to do this, you have to kind of sacrifice part of your medical ambition. But you can still have a very satisfying life.
Yeah.
You get paid less, but there you go. What's money?
Now my heart kept throwing punky beats. Nothing regular, nothing sweet, like some kind of drum solo. Looking out for that old love now. Just now my old heart got burned down in Hammersmith Hospital, best in town. Scarred but smiling and looking up, reaching out for that old love. Well, reaching out for that old love. Well, reaching out for that old love. NHS, our precious thing, heals us all, makes us sing, keeps us hearty, young and old. NHS, our heart and soul. NHS, we love you still. Always have, always will. The folks who work you, queens and kings. NHS, our precious thing. Reaching out for that old precious thing. Reaching out for that old precious thing.
That's it for this episode. We've given you a taste of Christmas future, but we'll be back in a fortnight with a call for more conviviality, a ghost of Christmas past, some Svalbardian tales, and our usual mix of Christmas research. Until then, I'm Kamran and Rebecca. Thanks for listening.